Birmingham, Alabama, 1985. A city with a long memory. A city shaped by history, tension, and deep divisions. On a quiet night, a crime shocked the community. Within weeks, police would announce they had their suspect. And before the evidence was fully examined, a man's future would already be sealed. In early 1985, 2 fast food restaurant managers in Birmingham were shot and killed during separate robberies. The crimes were brutal. Fear spread quickly. The pressure on law enforcement was immediate. The public wanted answers. And they wanted them fast. Anthony Ray Hinton was not a criminal mastermind. He had no history of violence. He lived a quiet life, worked hard, and took care of his mother. On the night of the first murder, he was at home. His mother confirmed it. But an alibi alone would not protect him. Police focused their investigation on a single piece of evidence: a gun found in Hinton's home. Investigators claimed the weapon matched shell casings from the crime scenes. That claim would become the foundation of the case. Not eyewitnesses. Not DNA. Not fingerprints. Just a firearm and an expert opinion. Hinton was represented by a court-appointed attorney. The defense had almost no money. They could not afford a qualified firearms expert. Instead, the attorney hired someone with no real experience in ballistic analysis. That decision would prove devastating. At trial, the prosecution presented their case with confidence. Their expert testified that the bullets matched Hinton's gun. The defense expert struggled. He was unprepared, inexperienced, easily discredited. To the jury, the conclusion seemed obvious. There was no DNA evidence, no fingerprints, no eyewitness who could clearly place Hinton at the crime scenes. The case depended almost entirely on forensic testimony. Testimony that would later be called into question. The jury deliberated. And then the decision came. Guilty. The courtroom fell silent. Anthony Ray Hinton was sentenced to death. Hinton was sent to Alabama's death row, a place designed not for rehabilitation, but for waiting. Waiting for appeals. Waiting for dates. Waiting for an execution that could come at any time. He would remain there for nearly 30 years. From the moment he entered death row, Hinton made a decision. He would not let the system break him. He maintained his innocence. And he believed, even when no one else did, that the truth would one day come out. The arrest was complete. The trial was over. The sentence was final. But the evidence had not been fully tested. And the fight for truth was only beginning. Death row was not like other parts of prison. It was quieter, more isolated, more final. Anthony Ray Hinton was placed in a small concrete cell alone. A steel door closed behind him. And for the first time the reality set in. He was not just imprisoned. He was waiting to die. Hinton's cell was only a few feet wide. Concrete walls. A narrow bed. A toilet in the open. The lights were harsh. Privacy did not exist. Days blurred into one another. Time was no longer measured in hours, but in years. On death row, every sound carried meaning. The rattle of keys. Footsteps in the hallway. Doors opening and closing. Any movement could signal bad news. Hinton learned to listen carefully. Sometimes guards walked past. Sometimes they stopped. Every moment carried uncertainty. Executions were scheduled months in advance. Inmates watched as others were taken away. Some never returned. Hinton attended funerals for men he had spoken with through the walls. Men who had once laughed. Men who had once hoped. Their absence left silence behind. Living under a death sentence changes how the mind works. Fear becomes constant. Hope becomes dangerous. Many inmates broke under the pressure. Some stopped speaking. Some stopped caring. Hinton refused to surrender. He chose to laugh when he could. He chose to talk. He chose to survive mentally, even when the system expected him to disappear. Hinton became known for his sense of humor, not because life was funny, but because laughter was protection. It kept despair from taking over. It reminded him that he was still human, still alive. Death row inmates were isolated from one another, but voices traveled. Conversations passed through vents and walls. Hinton built friendships without ever seeing faces. They shared stories. They shared fears. They shared hope. Those connections became lifelines. Years passed. Technology advanced. Music changed. The world outside moved forward. Inside death row, time stood still. Hinton watched seasons change through a small window. He grew older in the same cell. Letters from family kept him grounded. Visits were rare and controlled. Every goodbye felt heavy. He worried about his mother. He worried about the pain his absence caused. Yet he carried his burden silently. Legal appeals moved slowly. Some were denied without explanation. Others took years to be reviewed. Each rejection felt like a door closing. But Hinton did not give up. He believed the truth would outlast the system. After years on death row, Hinton reached a conclusion. If the system wanted him broken, he would remain whole. If it wanted silence, he would speak. If it wanted despair, he would choose hope. That decision kept him alive. Anthony Ray Hinton had survived death row. But survival was not freedom. Because somewhere outside those walls, the evidence still waited to be challenged. And one day, someone would finally listen. From the beginning, something about the case felt wrong. There was no clear motive. No eyewitness placing Hinton at the crime scenes. No DNA evidence. Yet one element continued to hold everything together. The gun. If the gun failed, the case failed. The prosecution had relied heavily on firearms analysis. Their expert claimed the bullets recovered from the crime scenes matched Hinton's gun. But forensic science, especially in the 1980s, was far from perfect. Many methods were based on subjective interpretation, not certainty. Hinton's original defense team lacked resources. They could not afford a qualified firearms expert. The expert they hired had no formal training in ballistics. In court, he struggled to explain basic concepts. The jury noticed. And the damage was irreversible. For decades, the firearm evidence went unchallenged. Appeals focused on legal technicalities, not the science itself. Hinton remained on death row while the central piece of evidence was never properly examined. Time passed. Nearly 30 years. Then something changed. Hinton's case reached the attention of the Equal Justice Initiative, a legal organization based in Alabama. They took a closer look, not at the headlines, but at the evidence. The organization hired a nationally recognized firearms expert. This expert examined the same gun, the same bullets, the same shell casings. The conclusion was immediate and clear. The gun did not match the crime scene evidence. With that finding, the foundation of the prosecution's case crumbled. If the gun was not a match, there was no case. The conviction rested on faulty forensic testimony, testimony that should never have been allowed. The new evidence was presented to the courts. At first, resistance remained. Admitting error after decades is difficult, but the facts were undeniable. The firearm evidence was unreliable, and Hinton's trial had been deeply flawed. In 2014, the United States Supreme Court ruled that Hinton's original defense had been constitutionally inadequate. This was not a declaration of innocence, but it opened the door. For the first time, the system acknowledged that Hinton had not received a fair trial. With the new forensic findings, prosecutors were forced to reassess. Without the gun evidence, there was nothing left. No witnesses. No physical proof. No case. The narrative that had held for decades unraveled. After nearly 30 years on death row, the unthinkable began to feel possible. Hinton might be free, not because of mercy, but because the evidence never supported his conviction. The science had spoken. The evidence had failed. And the system stood at a crossroads. The final question remained. Would justice arrive, even after decades of delay? In April 2015, something happened that Anthony Ray Hinton had imagined for decades. A guard came to his cell. This time, the message was different. After nearly 30 years on death row, the state of Alabama dropped the charges against him. The door opened. Hinton stepped outside. For the first time since 1985, he was no longer a prisoner. Freedom did not feel immediate. Cars looked different. Buildings felt unfamiliar. Technology had advanced beyond recognition. Hinton had entered prison before the internet existed. Now it was everywhere. The world had moved forward without him. Hinton was 59 years old when he was released. Nearly half his life had been spent waiting for execution. Those years could not be returned. He had missed birthdays, holidays, family moments that only happen once. Freedom came, but it came late. Despite the error, the state did not apologize. There was no compensation for the years lost. Legally, Hinton was free. But financially and emotionally, he was left to rebuild from nothing. Justice corrected itself. Quietly. Simple tasks felt unfamiliar. Crossing the street. Using a phone. Choosing what to eat. Hinton had lived under strict control for decades. Now every decision was his. Freedom required learning. Many expected anger. Hinton chose something else. He spoke openly about forgiveness, not because the harm was small, but because carrying hatred would have kept him imprisoned. He refused to let the system take more from him. After his release, Hinton became an advocate. He spoke about wrongful convictions, about flawed forensic science, about what happens when poverty meets the justice system. His voice carried weight, not because of accusation, but because of experience. Hinton's case forced uncomfortable conversations. How many convictions rely on unreliable forensic methods? How many defendants lack resources to defend themselves? How many mistakes remain undiscovered? The questions reached far beyond one man. The case demonstrated a difficult truth. Justice delayed is not justice denied, but it is justice diminished. Even when corrected, errors leave permanent scars. Hinton focused on living fully. He traveled. He spoke. He reconnected with people. Each day outside prison mattered, not as compensation, but as proof that survival had meaning. Anthony Ray Hinton's story is not just about wrongful conviction. It is about resilience, about the cost of error, and about the responsibility systems carry when lives are at stake. Hinton once said that the hardest part was not death row. It was waiting for someone to listen, waiting for the truth to matter. Freedom arrived, but the years remained lost. And the lesson remains clear. When justice depends on resources, time, and chance, mistakes do not disappear. They wait.